Hi guys, no editing to do today, so I don't feel too guilty about stealing some time. Okay, what I want to do today is to go through some very interesting cameras, some of them old, some of them new, and just show you what was groundbreaking technology in that time and why it formed a new trend going forward. I think it's pretty interesting for us to get an idea of where the different formats are going these days. So you've got people still today that are using full frame digital, using the APS-C size format, which is a little bit smaller, using micro four thirds, which is what we're talking about, and even using smaller sensors. Of course, there are other guys who are using bigger sensors. If you go to an advertising shoot or a high-end magazine shoot, you'll see guys using more medium format cameras, which is a bigger format of camera with a digital back on it, and that digital back can shoot like an 80 megapixel, 100 megapixel image, and the quality is outstanding. The systems are really expensive, so you've got to invest heavily in those systems, or you rent one for the day. And we're not going to go there. We're talking about more consumer style of cameras that professionals are using today. Okay, so back in the day, people used to use film in cameras, and the problem with film is that it was light sensitive, and you needed something light tight to keep it in, or else it would get exposed to light. So this was a Kodak Instamatic camera, and this was revolutionary because they started putting film inside canisters or spools, and they kept them light tight, so you could actually take the spool out of the camera in the light without the film getting exposed. Hey, that was a big plus. People were excited about that technology. This was like right out there. This was my father's first proper camera, also a film camera, called a Nicomat, which later became Nikon or Nikon, however you want to pronounce it. Revolutionary because suddenly they started using a light metering system inside the camera, so you didn't have to carry one of these ancient things around with you. It looks like it's come off the ark, but this is what people used to measure the amount of light in a scene. Then they would set their f-stop and their shutter speed and their ISO. Then they would know the correct exposure to use in the camera to take a good picture. Okay, so people didn't have to carry one of these around anymore because there was one built into the body. Okay, massive breakthrough. Twin lens reflex camera. Okay, this used film also in the back, a larger format of film than the Nicomat. Why this was a breakthrough is it's called a twin lens reflex camera. So in the old days, like with the box Brownie, you had this horrible distorted image of what you were actually taking a picture of. It was very unclear and the quality was terrible, and you were kind of guessing like which way to turn and how to compose and stuff. It really wasn't nice. Suddenly this system came out with two lenses. This lens is what actually took your picture and projected your image onto your film. This is the lens that you looked through. Both lenses moved together, so your focusing was going to be exactly the same because they're in line. And you could look through the top and you could focus as you go. All right, massive breakthrough because the quality of what you are seeing now is absolutely brilliant compared to what you had before. All right, couple of small problems. Because you were looking a little bit higher than the actual lens, you have a little bit of a parallax error, but we kind of worked through that. And also when you're looking through this now, because there isn't a prism on this camera, there's only a mirror sitting in it here, your image is reversed and upside down and back to front. So you need a little bit of time to kind of work out which way you're pointing. But major breakthrough. Olympus film camera, the OM4, the first camera to come out with spot metering. Spot metering, suddenly your light metering jumped a couple of light years forward, and instead of your light meter in the camera just metering an average scene and giving you an average type of meter, you could, by pushing one little button on the top here, use a spot meter which measured only 1% of the middle of your frame. Okay, so it would take that 1% only and take a light reading off that specific point only, if you wanted it to, and disregard everything else. Brilliant if you're shooting a scene far away and you're wanting to get an exact exposure of a specific thing in that scene because you want that to be exposed correctly. Okay, I won't go into the technicalities of How you use a spot meter, that's a whole nother lesson, but it's a case of you need to know how to use it. But nonetheless, the technology was there, major breakthrough. Nikon, one of their first mirrorless cameras. I've talked about this briefly before. Tiny little sensor inside. I think it was like maybe an 18 megapixel sensor, stand corrected. Because there's no mirror in the body, suddenly look how skinny they can make cameras. Huge breakthrough, so light, lenses, tiny. Because there's no mirror flapping up and down and making things really slow, this camera could shoot 60 frames in a second, full resolution photo frames. Okay, that mirror disappearing from systems is a major advantage. The mirror is a heavy, clunky thing that jumps up and down, makes a noise, takes time to move up and down. Suddenly with the mirror gone, you're open to a whole lot of new things, especially like taking pictures quickly or taking multiple pictures, taking bursts in a scene, and then it shows you the burst of, let's say, 30 pictures, and you quickly run your finger across and you choose the one that you like. You say, that's the one I want to keep, gets rid of all the others. So it just became a much faster system to use. Even though this is pretty old now, it's still pretty quick. Also, because the sensor's so small, my father does bird photography and he uses the bigger brother of this little camera, but if you're putting a 300mm lens on here, suddenly that 300mm lens becomes almost a 900mm lens because of the small sensor. So for bird photography, it's fantastic. He's using a lens that's that long and he's getting a 900mm reach, which is crazy. Okay, going back a little bit in time, why was this a major breakthrough? Polaroid, instant pictures, mind-blowing. No spending 2 weeks at the lab before you can see your image, 30 seconds, a minute, and it's out. Major breakthrough. More recently, this funny little guy, video camera or stills camera, 360 degrees. So you can shoot a video in 360 degrees. When you play it back later, you can look around while you're playing it back and zoom in and zoom out. Same for photography, for pictures, 360 degree camera. Who would have thought? And it stitches them together automatically as it takes it. Right, I'm going to show you a little baby of mine that I carry in my bag because I love it for video and it has its advantages for stills too. It's a Sony RX10 Mark II, this one. It has a fixed lens. I don't mean a fixed focal length of lens. It's got a zoom lens which is 24 to 200 millimeters. What I mean by a fixed lens is you can't take the lens physically off the body. It's one piece, all right? And there's no mirror in this, it's mirrorless. Because you can't take the lens off the camera body, here are two major things that they've been able to put into the camera that I use a lot, and it's fantastic technology. One is a built-in neutral density filter. For those of you who shoot video, you know how helpful that is. If you've got a scene that's too bright, you can't get that shallow depth of field that you're wanting to get out of this, especially if you want the cinematic type of look of video where you want a shallow depth of field. If you've got too much light around, that's really difficult to achieve. With a neutral density filter, it literally puts it's like a gray piece of glass, like sunglasses I guess, in front of your sensor, and that chops out a whole lot of light that's reaching your sensor. So with a touch of a button, you can enable that ND filter or you can disable it. Videographers who don't have that need to get filters that they put on the front of the lens, which is a bit of a pain because they get dust on them and you've got to be careful you don't drop them. It's just a pain. So with a built-in ND filter, it's a major plus for videography. The other thing that this has, which is fantastic, is a between the lens shutter. Instead of having your shutter right in front of your CCD or your CMOS sensor, the shutter sits in between the lens elements. Why is that great? No longer are you restricted to a flash synchronization speed, when you're shooting stills of course, of, let's say, 180th of a second or 200th of a second or 250th of a second, which is pretty much the industry's fastest shutter speed. This one you can go up to, I think, 2,500ths of a second. I'm not going to go into that tutorial, but it opens up a whole lot of opportunities for shooting outdoors, even in midday, using flash and letting the flash be your main light source. Right, different lesson. But these are all things that have been breakthroughs in technology, and we as professionals dream about taking all of the best characteristics and the best features of all of these different camera systems and putting them into one camera. Would that not be a miracle? However, it's not going to happen, so let's move on. I love that it's compact. Although it's compact, it's still built really well, so it feels and looks good. The lenses are compact, makes your bag a lot lighter than it used to be. The rotating screen at the back is fantastic to tip it up, down, left, right. If you can shoot from the ground, you can shoot from the sky. You can turn it in so it protects the screen when you're not using the camera. I love the electronic viewfinder that you look through. Right, bear in mind, with all mirrorless cameras, you now have to look at a digital representation in the viewfinder of what you're shooting. Previously, with SLRs and DSLRs, your light traveled through your lens, hit your mirror, bounced up, hit the prism, came down into your eye. So you had a continual view of what you were shooting until, of course, you press the shutter. And I have to say that the viewfinder, the EVF, electronic viewfinder, on the Lumix G9 is fantastic. There's no lag at all. It's as if you're seeing something for real. It's bright. It's got a lot of pixels on it. That's one thing I thought I would miss, is the old style viewfinder where you're seeing your scene in reality, because other systems that I've had, there is a little bit of a lag and you feel like you're not really in touch with your subject matter that you're shooting. However, the Lumix G9 is fantastic. It's great technology. I love the fact that after you've shot a picture, you can see it in the EVF while you're looking, and you don't have to pull your face away to look on the back of the screen to see if you're happy with your pic or not. You can just keep your eye there and keep shooting. That's great. Okay, there's an important thing that I'd like to say, and something that I'm very excited about. Up until recently, Micro Four Thirds hasn't been that popular for videographers. Yes, they use the GH5, but there is a beast in the market which has stolen everyone's hearts, and that is the Sony A7S. That camera is a beast because it can shoot in extremely low lighting conditions. It's only a 12 megapixel sensor, but because there are less megapixels on the sensor, it can now be more sensitive to light, and it gives you absolutely amazing results. Remember, the Sony is a full frame camera. However, Lumix have now come out with the GH5S. The size of the sensor has gone down from 20 megapixels to 10.5 megapixels, and because they've done that, that sensor now has the same sensitivity to light as the Sony's. So fantastic. Panasonic can now play in the space of shooting low light video and have amazing results. That's going to be my next body, and when I do get it, I'm going to keep chatting to you about it because I think it's going to be a beauty.